Atriox is the leader of the Banished. He made his first appearance during Halo Wars 2, where he immediately cemented himself to be a devastatingly powerful and effective enemy, effortlessly ambushing and dominating all 3 Spartans of Red Team, severely injuring Douglas in the process. We get to know more about his origins and what motivated him to ultimately defy the Covenant and become the leader of the splinter faction known as the Banished. He spent years building his strength and his army, while pillaging the Covenant Empire for all he could take. And when the Covenant fell in 2552, the power vacuum that followed left Atriox in prime position to push the Banished to become a dominant force in the galaxy. After fighting with the crew of the Spirit of Fire above the Ark, his flagship and only means of transport was destroyed, and he waited for the rest of his forces to come and retrieve him from the Ark, to ultimately return to the galaxy via an Ark portal on Reach, where the Banished then quickly set about chasing down humanity, fighting against the Created, and ultimately stumbling upon Zeta Halo. His confrontation with Cortana led her to ultimately scuttle part of the ring and force Zeta Halo to retreat to an unknown system to make repairs. Immediately following this, Atriox disappears entirely, ultimately leaving the Banished in the hands of his second-in-command, Escharum, and we don't hear from him for the entirety of the battles between Master Chief and the UNSC survivors and the Banished. Why not? And how does his absence perhaps point towards one of Zeta Halo's biggest mysteries? Hey everyone, welcome back to Installation 00, and in today's Lore and Theory we are revisiting an important and often overlooked portion of the Halo Infinite campaign story and the lore ultimately surrounding these events to discuss and hypothesize on the true realities of the last remaining ring of the senescent array, Zeta Halo, the oldest of the sacred rings, something I'm currently dubbing the time dilation theory. In order to get to grips with the ultimate goal of this video, we need to recap what Atriox has been doing between Halo Wars 2 and his ultimate disappearance on Zeta Halo, as Atriox seems to be at the heart of the series of events I'm interested in here. He might not be responsible for them, but he's the medium through which the primary subjects of this video are experienced. So, let's take a quick recap. Following Atriox's return to the galaxy following the events of Halo Wars 2, and as covered in the book Shadows of Reach, Cortana issues Atriox with a choice to stand with the Created or to suffer the consequences. Atriox, ever the boss, remains loyal to his Banished. Cortana destroys the brute homeworld of Doizak as a punishment. Atriox, in that moment, vows to seek revenge and see justice be done. Infinity arrives at Zeta Halo and Master Chief deploys the weapon to trap Cortana. The weapon contains her, preventing Cortana from leaving via the domain or calling in Guardians as reinforcements. Unable to leave, she is at the mercy of the weapon. After beating the living snot out of Master Chief, Atriox goes ringside and travels to the silent auditorium to confront Cortana. Cortana is expecting the Chief, and mourns the realization that Atriox defeated him aboard the Infinity. Unable to leave or to defend herself against Atriox, the two enter into a conversation. They converse at length regarding the consequences of their choices and actions. During this time, Atriox educates himself, either with Cortana's help or just on his own volition, and realizes secrets about Zeta Halo. Finally, after asking Atriox to humour her, Cortana sacrifices herself. Immediately following this, Cortana is gone, leaving behind recursive code. The weapon remains stranded for 6 months, and Chief drifts alone in space in survival mode for 6 months before being recovered and revived by Fernando Esparza. And we don't hear from Atriox again. We very quickly establish in the first mission the Chief undertakes against the Banished following being woken up that Atriox is presumed dead, and Escharum has taken control of the Banished in his absence. And that's it. Except it isn't. In the legendary ending of Halo Infinite, we see Atriox again. He has found the Silexes containing the Endless, also known as the Xalanin, hidden away somewhere within Zeta Halo. He has a scar on his face and his war paint is gone, but aside from this, little else is known, as at least a matter of fact. What I find particularly interesting, however, is in this very cutscene we can hear a conversation taking place between the Grand Edict and the Monitor of Zeta Halo, Despondent Pyre, in relation to the Endless and their survival of the firing of the array nearly 100,000 years ago, and an insistence to imprison them and study them to learn their secrets and preserve the Forerunner's truth. In addition to this, there is part of an exchange that is particularly interesting.
Time is not a construct we can control.
And we cannot allow it to be theirs. If Halo cannot end them, it must imprison them.
Now yes, this line could be figurative, but what if it isn't? Another item in this cutscene of particular interest is before we even get any images playing, there is a date stamp in the bottom left corner of this cutscene. 97,368 BCE. 77 years earlier, in the year of 97,445 BCE, the Halo array was fired to bring an end to the Forerunner Flood War, wiping the galaxy clean of sentient life and beginning the receding process. Why put that date on a cutscene? It might point towards the time when the conversation is taking place between the Grand Edict and Despondent Pyre. But again, what if it isn't? What if the cutscene itself is happening on this date? Stick with me here. That means that Atriox is walking up to the Endless Silexes in the past, suggesting that at the moment that Cortana made her final sacrifice, something happened which transported Atriox back in time to a time after the Endless had been imprisoned. Now, I will just add, perhaps it's not literally back in time, but it's been spoken about many times in the campaign that Zeta Halo is different from the others, with reference made to rings within rings and repeating the sins of the past and time seeming to loop in perpetuity. So it might be that Zeta Halo's local time is looped or can be traversed with the right knowledge. The statement that time isn't a construct the Forerunners could control isn't strictly accurate. Yes, the Forerunners couldn't travel back in time in the conventional sense at least, but local time being able to be manipulated is something that the Forerunners knew to do very well. The shield world of Onyx, also called Sarcophagus, saw Blue Team, a few Spartan 3s, Mendez and Halsey get locked within. Inside, only a couple of weeks passed, meanwhile outside, months had gone by. And this is not the only example of temporal anomalies in regards to Forerunner constructs. Cryptums halt the passage of time entirely for the occupant when active. Forerunner stasis pods, their equivalent of cryopods, also do the same to time by shifting the pod into a micro slipspace rift. In these examples, time was either slowed or stopped entirely. It may then not be seemingly too much of a jump to be able to make that process reverse somewhat. It might not even be necessary to reverse time if time is simply held static locally relative to the rest of the universe. With a single instant frozen in time, any series of events could be set off with purpose. As in a frozen state, the entity in control would have a completely static known environment with minimized variables to start with. Then any interference thereafter could, or indeed would, cause a ripple effect that could be done reproducibly, time and time again. Basically, it would be like sealing Zeta Halo's local time and making it completely stationary shortly after the Xalanin were imprisoned on the ring. Then a series of events could be seeded and play out over a small course of time where the time dilation effect is slightly released, but time still passes slowly versus outside in the rest of the universe. And then when that series of events has happened, it is stopped again, frozen once more in complete stasis, where then the entire process is reset and started again. In this way, millions, if not billions of years of time could pass on Zeta Halo when, according to the rest of the galaxy, 100,000 years had passed. It's like stretching a single moment out infinitely and controlling the events thereafter, quite literally controlling the butterfly effect. Even the suggestion of rings within rings may be an allegory to slipspace within slipspace. If a single slipspace rift can be controlled temporally by the Foreigners, what if you put that slipspace rift within another slipspace rift that can also be temporally controlled? Suddenly, just by the inheritance of property, you have a way to reset the clock on the inner slipspace rift as often as you like. Is this why offensive bias was needed? Because the calculations and oversight needed to maintain this and perform this grand experiment required the greatest mind the Foreigners could muster. In a nutshell, is it at all possible that Zeta Halo has systems built into it that can do the same for its local space-time, sealing it, a rift within a rift, time within time, ring within ring, allowing time to be reset, controlled, slowed, dilated, and stretched over seemingly billions of years, and yet only actually happening in respect to the rest of the universe over a much shorter time span. That's the bulk of the theory, but even if not, time manipulation is certainly not beyond the precursors, and there are many, many suggestions towards the Xalanin being precursor in origin. Even the device that Atriox holds in this very cutscene is very similar in representation of the glyph on the front of the Silexes that contain the Xalanin, again suggesting towards this device being Xalanin in origin, not Foreigner. Is this device a sort of temporal lock or intermediary device allowing Atriox passage through non-linear time? At this stage, I don't have any answers to these questions. They are, after all, just hypotheses based on the limited information we have available and the larger lore. I am aware that Red Nomster has done a few videos on time and the Xalanin, and I've made a couple of videos on the subject myself. But with all we know, all I've presented here, and all of the extended lore in regards to what the Foreigners could do with their technology, what could this mean for the galaxy? If Zeta Halo is time-locked, rings within rings, time within time, rifts within rifts, and single moments are stretched out over billions of years, able to be reset at a moment's notice, and Atriox perhaps even seemingly possessing a device that allows him to move between these instances but not technically travel through time. Even in this cutscene, we don't know for certain that he's intending on releasing the Endless in that cutscene. All we know for certain is that the device seems to grant him a way to move around irrespective of the temporal locks on Zeta Halo, assuming the pitched theory here is true, and that it's also granted him access to the room that the Silexes of the Endless are being held in. That's literally it. So his intentions are entirely unclear, and the conversations we saw between Cortana and Atriox are also only a tiny fragment of likely a much larger and more detailed exchange. So we don't know what was spoken about in any way that could have adversely affected Atriox's goals or intentions. We do know, however, that whatever was spoken about definitely changed Cortana's position. So, in the absence of any further information, what's your take? Is time and time manipulation an emerging factor in Halo, given what the Foreigners are capable of with their technology, and the idea of slipspace rifts within slipspace rifts, stationary time within stationary time, and being able to bleed out single instances for almost in perpetuity? Is it at all possible that Zeta Halo has access to extremely dilated time, which to an outside observer would look like time travel? Do the precursors and thus the Xalanin have access to non-linear or simultaneous time? Is that why they avoided the firing of the array? Is that why holding them for all this time hasn't really in any way, shape or form caused any issue with them? Is Atriox absent from Halo Infinite's campaign because he's technically not even in the same era, or slipspace rift, or temporal zone, if you like. Is Zeta Halo locked in repeating time bubbles? And has Aatrox got a device or figured out how to begin navigating through it? Stick your thoughts in the comments and I'll revisit this in due course. Until then. Thanks for watching. If I could respectfully ask, if you enjoyed this video, consider hitting the subscribe button and the little bell icon so you're told the second a new video hits the shelves. Hit this video with a like if you enjoyed, and if not, it's not a problem. And be sure to pop a comment below to throw me an idea on what you want to see next. Massive thanks to my awesome patrons, Spartan10148, the Metarch of my facility, Falcon, Prophet, Leon, Sophia, Mikhail and Irrefutable, the monitors of the array, Darian, Flaming Halo, Cameron, Spartan0137, the Cave Potato, Andrew, Shia, Dakota and Ghost, my diligent sub-monitors, my fleet of Strato Sentinels, and my loyal enforcers, and all other patrons who have supported the channel and helped keep the domain operational. Huge props and recognition to Todd Morrison, Spartan137, Wesley Stuckey and Jacob Kemp for jumping on as Tier 0 Transcendent YouTube members. You guys are epic. Shout out to John for reasons. And if you want to help support the channel and score yourself tons of perks and merch, head over to Patreon or consider becoming a YouTube member. Links, as ever, are in the description. Much love, take it easy everyone, and find peace in the domain.